Welcome to Stories Worth Hearing. I am your host, John Quick. Today we have a remarkable guest returning to the show. Governor Eric Greitens is someone whose life has been defined by service, strength, and resilience. Many of you reached out after his first appearance and said it was one of the most powerful conversations we have ever had on this podcast. So I knew we had to bring him back. In this episode, Governor Greitens and I talk about the state of the country, how President Trump is shaping his second term, how leadership impacts everything from foreign policy to military morale, and why the direction of America still offers a lot of hope. We also dive into some of the most defining moments of his time as governor and talk openly about what he went through when political forces tried to take him out. His perspective on courage, integrity, and faith is something you are going to want to hear. So settle in. This is a powerful conversation with Governor Eric Greitens. These are the stories that matter. These are the stories worth hearing.
Well, Governor, welcome back to the show. This will be fun to chat with you. Excited to kind of catch up here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be back on with you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for having me, man. I really enjoyed our last conversation. Appreciate what you do. Thanks for having me back.
I can tell you that the folks that listen to this podcast really enjoyed our first chat. It's been maybe a year or so ago, so it'll be, I think, fun to just kind of jump back in and hear how you're doing, what you think about kind of what's going on in the U.S., how you feel like Trump's doing, and give some hope to folks that maybe are going through some tough times. But let's first talk about, how do you think the U.S. is doing? I mean, I know you have your finger on the pulse where you live, but you're also friends with folks all over the U.S. in, the business world, the political world. So how do you think we're doing? How do you think Trump's doing in his second term in office?
Well, I think first of all, one of the things that I always remind people of is people get very focused on the day to day. They're always focused on, this headline, and stuff that happens 48 hours ago feels like it's old news. I think it's nice sometimes to pull back and take a little bit more of a wider view of where we're at. And if you just remind people that it was Joe Biden was in office, Joe Biden was the president of the United States of America, right? And you remember what he kind of looked like on camera. You remember him doddering around, right? Like it feels like it's been a long time, but it hasn't even been a year. Okay. And then also, when you also think back on what America has lived through, the harshness, the tragedy of, thankfully, Trump's put an end to all of the transgender nonsense of like men playing women's sports. We had all of the COVID craziness that the Biden administration was pushing, so much loss of personal freedoms for Americans. And of course, the tremendous corruption that the Biden administration brought back in. I mean, still to this day, you have people claiming that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, right? All of this stuff, it's just important to remember that, 50 years from now, when they look back, people are like, really? Like that guy, Joe Biden? That was the president of the United States, right? So keep that in mind. And then when you turn by contrast, I think people are really appreciative of the energy that President Trump has brought to his presidency. And I think in particular, one of the things that I often focus on is you think about the place that presidents play in history. A lot of it has to do with foreign affairs. One of the reasons why Ronald Reagan is so revered was because of his role in helping the United States to win the Cold War, right? You look at what President Trump was able to achieve in his first term with the Abraham Accords, which was really extraordinary, with Israel normalizing relations with a lot of Arab states. And then you look at the strides that he's taken already to put an end to the war in Gaza. That's something that the Biden administration repeatedly failed to do. They really didn't even take any serious efforts to do so. All of that happened also because President Trump was able to take very strong and effective military action against Iran. All of these things have actually made the United States safer when you look at the progress that's been made around the peace efforts in the Middle East. So I think that's one piece that a lot of people don't often see. Another thing, there's lots of commentary, of course, on lots of political issues, but the other thing that I've found is that President Trump has also really put in an effort to make sure that the government is actually delivering on services. When you talk to veterans, they will tell you that there was a massive difference in President Trump's first term and how the VA delivered services. And now that Trump is back in office, you're hearing from veterans again. They appreciate what the president has been doing to make the VA more effective for veterans. So whether it's foreign policy, domestic policy, lots of different issues, but these are places where you'll see the legacy media won't give the president any credit, but I think he's actually made some very strong moves.
How does a affect, let's say the Army, Air Force, Marines, all those kinds of folks who potentially get a new boss every 4 years, a new president? Does it affect morale when they have a Trump as opposed to a Biden as their boss?
I think the answer is yes, 100%. 100%. It affects morale. And the place you can see, you don't have to take my word for it. Look at the recruiting numbers. Look at the recruiting numbers. There's a massive recruiting crisis when Joe Biden was in office. And then as soon as President Trump comes in office, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, I'm not sure about the Space Force numbers, but they're all of the recruiting numbers. You saw a massive increase in them when President Trump came into office, because young people who are looking at the prospect of putting their lives on the line are asking themselves, who's the commander in chief? And we've always had in the United States a non-political military who was willing to and able to serve whoever was elected by the people of the United States of America. But I will tell you that it makes a very big difference in terms of morale when people believe that they have a president who's going to use American forces wisely and who also honors the United States military.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Let's shift a little bit. I'd love to hear, your thoughts on being governor. You were the governor. I think during the time, I think a lot of folks in your state really appreciated and enjoyed you being the governor. You faced similar things that Trump faces now on a daily basis, where cancel culture comes in. And if there was a poster child for resilience, your face would be all over that. But talk to me a little bit about some of those proud moments you had as governor. What were some of the things that you still look back on and say, man, I'm proud that got accomplished?
There are so many proud moments. I'll touch on just a couple of them. One of the things that I'm most proud of when I was governor is we built a great team. We had a fantastic team. And when I was governor, one of the first things that I did was I built a public safety team. We have police officers, firefighters, first responders who all came together, because a lot of your listeners will remember Ferguson, Missouri in 2015 was the birthplace of the Black Lives Matter and anti-police movement. That was before I was governor. And we knew that when I was governor, we knew that they were going to test us again. And indeed, in 2017, when I was governor, we had an incident where a white police officer had shot and killed a Black man on duty. And as the trial progressed, we had activists from Black Lives Matter and Antifa all over the country came to Missouri, and they said, after we're done, you won't even remember Ferguson. They said, we're going to burn Missouri to the ground. We worked with a fantastic team. Again, we had police chiefs, we had fire chiefs, we had the National Guard, we had a great communications team. And we used, Jonathan, what I call the heart and the fist. We were extraordinarily clear with everybody. And the message was very simple. It was, number one, that everyone in the United States of America has the constitutional right to protest. So anyone who's upset with a verdict that comes out, you will find that our police officers are out there and they are protecting everyone who is out there exercising their constitutional right to protest. But we were also very clear that throwing a brick through a window is not free speech, that if you assault a police officer, you're going to be arrested, My predecessor, when he was governor, he told people that he was giving the rioters a safe space to loot and to burn. And I said that when I'm governor, if you loot and you burn, the only safe space you're going to have is in a jail cell. So we were extraordinarily clear that number one, we're going to protect your constitutional rights. And number two, there's not going to be any tolerance for rioting, for looting, for burning. And long story short, Jonathan, after 3 days, and our team ended up making hundreds of arrests. After 3 days, Black Lives Matter and Antifa were defeated. And we proved that you could be compassionate, you could respect the Constitution of the United States of America, and that allowing rioting, allowing looting, allowing assaults on police officers, that was a choice. And it was a choice that we were not going to make when I was governor in Missouri. And after 3 days, Antifa and Black Lives Matter left, and they had broken a few windows and turned over some potted plants. And that was it. And I think that was one of my proudest moments as governor. Now, we also now know that it was after we were successful doing that, the George Soros funded prosecutor in St. Louis decided that she was going to make up a charge against me, right? So one of our greatest successes also awakened this tremendous enemy, which was George Soros and this George Soros funded prosecutor. But some of my other favorite moments, I will always remember going to release Judy Henderson from prison. She was a woman who served 36 years in prison for a murder she did not commit. The previous governors all the boards of probation and parole had all recommended that she be released. I did a full and complete review of her file along with my team. I remember one of the lawyers on my team came back after the first visit to Judy, and he said she's the most amazing woman in the world. She's fantastic. And I ended up going up personally, Jonathan, before Christmas, and I went to the prison myself on my very first year and told her that she was free. And we had called her family. Her daughter, Angel, she's written a wonderful book. It's called When the Light Finds Us. In fact, as I'm thinking of it, your guests or your listeners may enjoy having her on at some point. She just did a wonderful book called When the Light Finds Us. And it's a real story about her faith and her resilience through some incredibly hard times. I mean, imagine being in prison 36 years for a murder you didn't commit. And she still managed to raise her daughter from inside of prison. She's just an incredibly powerful woman. And that was one of the most important things I think I did as governor.
That's pretty awesome. I think that those are the things that, nobody can ever take those things away from you, no matter what kind of crap they throw, social media or whatever. It's like those kinds of things will stick with you forever, which is pretty awesome. You and I were chatting a little bit before the interview that Trump's second term looks way different and is more effective than Trump was maybe on the first term. Let's say, not that you're running, but let's say you get another term as governor. What do you think you would do different than you did your first term? Because I think, our governor, my governor, Governor Dunleavy, his second term looked way different than his first term. Had he, there's a lot of things I think, had he known going into blah, 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 he would have done blah, blah, blah different. And so is there anything, it's 10 years from now, you're, governor again in this hypothetical situation, what would you do different, going into it?
Well, I think one of the pages that you could take from the Trump second term playbook is that Trump in his first term realized how entrenched the bureaucracy was and that it was fighting him every single day when he was president. And so as he came in the second term, he appointed people who he knew were loyal. And he also made sure that he was going to take control of as much as he could. Look, they're still fighting him from time to time, right? But in order to drive change, you really had to control the executive branch. And I was very proud in our first term. We brought in incredible people. We had a fantastic cabinet of very talented people from all over the country. One of the things that I think I would do in the second term is also one of the things I do in the second term is also make sure that we're driving change at an even deeper level, not just looking at those cabinet positions, but looking 2, 3, 4 levels down in the departments to make sure that we have the right conservative change agents there. I think that's really essential.
Looking back on what happened to you, and you can give a little brief synopsis here after I spit out this question for folks that have been living under a rock and maybe haven't heard. But they sent their team to say, we're going to figure out how to cancel this governor because he's too freaking effective and there's too many people that like him, and they wanted to probably put you in a petri dish to see what they could get away with. Ultimately, they were in the wrong, right? They were the ones who are now getting convicted or going to jail or finding that they made up everything. Talk to me a little bit about what it was like going through that, because it's one thing to go through something like an attack on yourself and your family if you're not in the public life and it's only like 5 or 6 people know about it. It's another thing to do it in front of the entire United States and having it plastered on every media outlet out there and knowing I didn't do any of this, and we may not see, my point of view may not be seen for another 4 years. And I just kind of got to sit and wait for this thing to play through. That's got to just be nuts. So talk to me a little bit about that and where you found strength to keep going in and through all of it.
For sure. Well, I'll kind of give your listeners like a brief synopsis of the story and what happened, and then I'll kind of walk back through how we made it through. But as we were talking about earlier, we had an extraordinarily effective term as governor. We were changing things across the spectrum, and the George Soros organization didn't like that. We now know that a George Soros funded prosecutor decided that she was going to come up with a crime to charge me with. So a few weeks after I had ended the riots, she literally started paperwork. She wasn't sure what the crime was, but she decided that she was going to charge me with one. She then hired a corrupt former FBI agent to make a false case against me. They then enlisted corrupt journalists, one of whom was a convicted felon who ended up paying people $120,000 cash to lie about me. And that's only the $120,000 in cash that we know about that they paid. But this is how sick and kind of corrupt this operation was. Well, you fast forward to today, the corrupt FBI agent and the George Soros funded prosecutor were charged with 8 felonies for perjury, for evidence tampering, for misuse of public funds. Both of the prosecutor and the FBI agent have pled guilty. The prosecutor was found by the Missouri Supreme Court to have lied over 70 times to the court, lied to the judge, lied to the grand jury. Over 70 times she was found to have lied. She was admonished. She was fined by them. She later resigned. The truth has now come out, but one of the things that you have to live through is the fact that the legacy media, when we were going through this, they published literally, Jonathan, millions of negative, false stories about me. And it wasn't just in the United States, it was literally worldwide. This story was covered around the world. And I remember somebody sending me a story from the Jerusalem Post about this, right? So they cover the nonsense and they cover the lies in a worldwide way. But then once you're exonerated, when the prosecutor pleads guilty, when the FBI agent pleads guilty, when it all, whoa, they don't cover it. If they cover it at all, they bury it in a paragraph on page 7. So, and it's also one of the things that is tough as you're going through it is that now all of the facts are out. Now, today, people know that I was innocent and they know that the people who came after me are guilty. But at the time, they didn't. And we also had no guarantees that the truth would ever actually come out. I'm actually very lucky because there are a lot of people who are falsely accused and they're slaughtered in the media, and the truth never finds its way out. In my case, I was actually extraordinarily fortunate that it did. But that process also took years. It took years for all the truth to come out. It took years for the FBI agent and the prosecutor themselves to get prosecuted. And even when the story came out, it came out just as COVID was starting. So people were thinking about other things. And I think one of the things that you have to do as you're going through something like that is that you just have to have a rock solid sense of personal faith and personal integrity to know that it really, at the end of the day, it sounds so simple, but it doesn't matter what other people think. What matters is what you know and what you know to be true. And the world can turn on people in a very vicious, difficult way. It's probably happened to a lot of people who are listening to this podcast. One of the things that's happened for me, because I've survived this in the way that I have, so many people have come to me and have told me their stories about how they were attacked, how they were maligned. It happens, and one of the things that I've noticed is that if you really stand up for good, the forces of evil will come after you. And I recently wrote in a book that'll be coming out. The line I wrote is that scars left by the devil mark you as one of God's sons. So you can actually wear these scars proudly because you know that they came to you because you've done difficult things. And in your own life, you can try to find a way to take that pain, and it was really painful, and you turn it into wisdom. You take that suffering and you turn it into strength.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I have admired the most in your story is that in talking with you and some of your team members, I get to talk to people, successful people from all over the globe with this podcast, from elected officials to billionaires, and stuff happens to folks, and you guys have remained super positive. So I think that that's been something that I've seen and looked at, and it's been inspiring for me because it's very easy to be bitter. Something that happened to you.
Yes.
And similar things, maybe more worse or less worse, happen to people all the time. And I think the majority of the time, people choose to be angry, bitter, resentful, and negative. What's made you not do that? Because there's something different there than I think most folks. Is it faith? Is it because you've been to actual wars and this is all child's play? Because it's just kind of words on a paper. Tell me a little bit about what's made you decide to turn something that's really shitty into a positive thing.
Yeah, well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Look, I do think that it helped that, before I ever served in the military, I'd done a lot of work in humanitarian crises. So I'd seen terrible situations, people who'd lost their homes in Bosnia, genocide in Rwanda, kids who'd lost limbs to landmines in Cambodia. I'd seen real hardship and, poverty in one of Mother Teresa's homes for the destitute and dying in Calcutta. I'd seen that real hardship. I think, of course, obviously going through the SEAL teams, serving in Iraq, Afghanistan, Southeast Asia, the Horn of Africa, it gives you a perspective on what true pain is. Though I will often say, I will always tell people, I'd much rather fight the Taliban than fight journalists and politicians because they're more honest. The Taliban, they're just trying to kill you. It's just straight up, right? They're trying to kill you, and they're not pretending. So I think that perspective helps. But really, when you go through something like that, of course you have moments of anger. Of course you have moments of fear. Of course you have moments of bitterness. And I think you always get a choice in life. I think there's really only two emotions. There's fear and there's love. And you have to find a way to remember what you love and work for it and be part of it. I'm so fortunate because I have two beautiful sons, Joshua and Jacob. And, one of the great gifts that's actually been given to me was that because of stepping out of the schedule and the demands of public life, I've been able to be an incredible dad, an absolutely incredible dad. And they're 9 and 11 now. And I know I often think to myself, when I'm on my deathbed, what's going to be most important to me? And the fact that I've been able to spend this much time with them and have these quality trips and quality conversations and time going to soccer practice and basketball practice and all of this, I believe I already feel, and I think that at the end of my days, I'll also feel that this was a great gift.
I love that. I think you're going to look back on that and think, that there was a purpose for everything, and that maybe that was a part of the bigger purpose so you could spend some more time with your kids. Because Lord knows if you're in the governor's mansion or a senator or whatever, you just don't have much time for anything outside of that specific job. So last question to you is this, Governor. I want to be mindful of your time. You have a book coming out, a new book. I don't think it's out yet. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? What people could expect? What's it about? All those kind of details. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, well, when it actually comes out, we should come on and I'll talk. We'll have another podcast about the book. But right now, the working title is The Ultimate Rebellion Handbook, and it's a book about how a man can take back his soul from a world and a culture that's trying to take it away. Everywhere you look today, there are all of these demands on people's, and the ultimate rebellion today as a man is to really be master of your own life. And so that's what the book's all about.
We'll have you back on to chat about the book once it gets out. First of all, thanks so much for coming back on. Really appreciate you. Your story is inspiring. For folks that are listening, I'm going to link to the governor's website. He's got a couple books out already that people can go check out. I want to encourage folks to go check those out and buy yourself a copy. And I'll link the article as well that I did in Newsmax, kind of about your story. So really appreciate you coming on, Governor. You're welcome back anytime, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Honored to be on with you. Appreciate you.
On.